This is for those who want to follow along. This is Autobiography of an Idea. It's chapter 14, Face to Face. So I'm going to start reading it and I'm going to comment in the middle. If you have, let me get started. So first, he's setting the stage. If with open mind, one reads and observes industriously and long, if in so doing, one covers a wide field, and so covering reflects in terms of realism, he's likely, sooner or later, to be brought to a sudden consciousness that man is an unknown quantity and his existence unsuspected. So what he's saying is that this is man, and this existence is unsuspected. One will be equally amazed to note that philosophers, the theologians of all times, turn their backs upon man. So they are facing this way. They're turning their back on this entire circle. That is us, that is man, that is human. That from the depths of introspection, fixing their gaze in all directions, save the real one, they have uniformly evolved a phantasm, a series of phantoms, and have declared such to be man in his reality, and such reality to be depraved. A small feature, however, was overlooked by them in the neglect to observe that their man, in his depravity, had created the gods. So man has always yearned for the center. Their insistent view of man, a further product of their fantasy, lay in the dogma, protean in form, that man is creature. So it holds that man is over here without any spirit, without any living consciousness, ability to do this kind of transformations. Meanwhile, the real man was always at their elbow, or moving in groups or multitudes about them, or even looking them in the eyes and holding converse with them. But they did not see him. He was too near, too commonplace, too transparent. The gods were far away and could be understood. So most ideas of gods are stuff here in the periphery. The mighty man of war also turned his back, yet the wise man, the warrior, the priest differed in no valid sense from the multitude, enfolding them as in a Genesis. For man, in his state of depravity as creature, created these also as their demigods. So if you believe that you are this, then your gods are going to be of this kind as well. This man, not knowing himself and none else knowing him, lived as a mirage within a world of mirage, which he fancied real. So he's kind of we are living in this floating thoughts, floating expressions, floating feelings, floating interactions as a mirage, without grasping this integral reality, this integrated being. It was real for him, for such is the habit of man's imagination in playing tricks with him in his credulity. The careful reader and observer again may be astonished to note that to the multitudes, imagination as such is unknown, that multitudes are unconscious of this power within themselves. So we create all these things and we do not understand that these are coming from our imagination. Hence, the reader, the observer, who is not so completely unconscious of himself, becomes aware of the imposing phenomena that the huge, varied superstructure of civilization of all times have rested for their support on so tenuous a foundation as the fabric of the radiant dream of multitudes. So this is the idea that it is people's ideas, people's imagination, which is the support for civilizations, the superstructure of civilizations. That in such dream, he will clearly see imagination playing its clandestine role. The mass imagination of multitudes is thus seen to be the prime impelling and sustaining power in the origins and growth of civilization. So to understand individuals and what they actually hold, their ideas, their imagination, in order to understand civilizations. Let the mass imagination withdraw its consent, withhold its nourishing acquiescence and faith, then the civilization founded thereupon begins to wither at the top, emaciates, atrophies, and dies. So these structures look very large, but they are founded on individual ideas and imaginations. One will further note that such changes in mass imagination, in the mass dream, are of highly varied origins, but once underway are beyond recall. One also minutely notes the tricks of imagination are universal and beyond numbering and variety, permeating all phases of social fabric. Hence, man's vagaries and follies and cruelties are beyond computation. Yet all these betrayals and cajolings and trickeries flow from the same single source, namely the individual unconscious of his imagination is incessantly at work because he's not acquainted with its nature and unaware that he is its puppet. His waking hours are a continuous dream of inverted self. So this is the idea of inverted self. This is true man. This is our true nature. We identify ourselves with the periphery. We regard that as our nature. And when you do that, you have an inverted self. It is this that produces the forms. This is the function. This is a living, breathing, conscious, willing, choosing, moral human being. Such a being produces all kinds of forms, all kinds of products of culture, whether thoughts, expressions, feelings, interactions, habits. When you identify yourself with this, with the periphery, you are inverted self. You're inverting the natural progression, which is inner to outer, and reversing it. That is what Louis Sullivan calls the inverted self. It is the mass dream of the inverted self, populous with fears, overt and secret, that forms the continuous but gossamer thread upon which are strung as phantom beads all civilizations from the remotest past of record to the present day and hour. As we follow back upon this thread, one end of which is delicately attached to our own inverted secret thoughts, we find it unchanging from end to end, regardless of the environment. The civilization it passes through and upholds on its way are but local manifestations and exhibits. So this view of man of himself is the foundation on which civilization is based. that has its own progression. And there is all kinds of forms that ride on the top of it. This intense continuing preoccupation with inverted self makes it clear why man has turned his back on man. So turning the back on man is simply pointing outward here, pointing away from the center. Why man is still unknown to himself and unsuspected. And if you do not know yourself, you do not know other people as well. So long as imagination slyly tricked him into self-deprecation, self-debasement, and slavery of the creature conviction, or into the opposite, megalomania, with its unquenchable thirst for blood, for plunder and dominion, and with siren song beguiled him through the portals of a closed world of abstraction. He could not know himself, and the neighbor must remain a stranger, to be feared, despised, and placated. This is the generative power that produces all of these. If you deny that power, and if you only look at, if you say that only the forms are all that there are, then you are in continuous conflict with everybody else, because you're saying goods are here, they are limited, let me hold on to them for dear life. And that person has different things, different thoughts, different feelings, different interactions. They are them. This is me, because there is no, you have given up this generative ability. You're looking at everything statically. And then fear is a natural product of that. And the point he's making is that whether you want, the leash actually binds both slave as well as the master. It is the idea that all of this is right here. Indeed, until we come as pioneers to seek out and know imagination as such, to view it clearly defined as an erratic and dangerous power to be controlled, until we have observed with realistic clarity its multifarious doings, from black magic upwards to mighty deeds of hand, head, and heart, we shall remain remote from man's reality and from splendor of his native powers. One who has made the rough pilgrimage through the jungled infirmities of philosophy, of theology, and through the wilderness of turbid dream worlds, uttered by practical man who deals in cold, hard facts, one who, as pioneer, worked his troubled way through the undergrowth of culture with its acceptances, its preconceptions, its precious finalities, one who led on by a faith unfaltering, at last arrives at the rendezvous with life, here testifies the natural man as sound to the core and kindly, yet innocent of himself, as the seat of genius, as the container of limitless creative powers of beneficence. So he's talking now about discovery of this. Solely on the strength of this faith was begun the story of the child dream of power. Now, Sullivan's language is very flowery. So what he's saying is that he's talked a lot about this and how it operates. And now he's saying all of this, by operating here, people have turned their back on our true self. Our true self is the source of all creativity, all new generation. This is where the power of life resides. And that is what he's going to talk about, having separated this part, the periphery, from the center. So now he's going to start talking about this center. Okay, let's see here. How are we doing? Maritza, is this, how is this going? Is this pace, is this very difficult to understand? Is it easy to understand? What do you think?
Well, at this pace, I project we'll be done by 2 a.m.
No. I'm going to speed up. Don't worry about that.
No, but it's good. It's good. It just,
okay.
We're not going to get through it all, unfortunately.
We'll see. We'll see. All right. Okay, so now we are going to look at the nature. Okay, I'm going to skip a few things. Inasmuch as man has been affirmed herein as sound and kindly, let us examine him. So now he begins his examination of what man is. Rest assured, we shall find him not in him, that is not truly in ourselves, and was not there in latency as at birth. So he's saying that this is what he's talking about is natural to human beings. To begin, he's a worker. Okay, so now he's talking about this. He's talking about the action part here. Okay, so we act. That is, the foundation of life. We act. He's a worker and a wanderer in varied ways. His bodily powers, he may go here and there. He may move objects about, and he may change the order of things. Here at the outset, we find a portentous power, the power to change situations. He can make new situations. So this is, ability to actually change your environment. With his 10 fingers, he can do wonderful things, make things he needs, make accessory things to extend his muscular power. Thus, he changes his own situation. Thus, he manipulates. He further changes situations. He changes his own situations. He creates an environment of his own. One sees here the adventurer, craftsman, the doer, ever growing in power. Thus, man's first collective power within himself is the power to aspire, to work, to wander, to go places, from place to place, near and far, and to return to his home. Okay, so he's so far talking mostly about this power of action. Now comes into view that power we call curiosity. So now he's going to talk about this part. Now comes into view that power we call curiosity, and coupled with it, the power to inquire. Man's power to inquire we call a mental power. To distinguish it from its somatic power, so to distinguish it from its, we call it the mental power. It may have had a beginning. It can have no end. The result of inquiry we call knowledge. Its high objective we call science. The objective of science is more knowledge, more power, more inquiry, more power. Now, if to the power to do, we added the power to inquire. So if you combine this and this, you get this. Now he's going to talk about this. Man the worker grows visibly more compact in power, more potent to change situation because he understands them, and to make new situations for himself. The situation may be a deep gorge in a wilderness. The new situation shows a bridge spanning the chasm in one great leap. So this is all about this, of application of thought to the problem of living. And the virtue there is productivity. So now, let me just step back. Why did I make a big song and dance in the beginning between this and this? Okay, now we're going through these petals one by one. Okay, but always keep in mind that each of these powers is being seen from the perspective of a living being. And that these powers are integrated. You're not looking at isolated actions of these powers, but them acting in concert, spiraling together to create things much higher than any individual thing can possibly do. Thus it is that man himself, as it were, leaps the chasm through the adventurous coordination of his power to inquire and his power to do. And thus natural man ever enlarges his range of beneficence. His life experiences are real. He reverses the dictum, I think, therefore I am. It becomes in him, I am, therefore I inquire and do. I am is this core assertion of the center. Unless you have that, you do not have courageous action. Unless you have that, you do not have true curiosity, true inquiry, your mind ready to go, ready to challenge your thoughts. That I am is the starting point from which all of these powers are spiraling out. It is this affirmative I am that is man's reality. So this is man's reality, the center from which this is flowing out. It is flowing out and then flowing in. Wherefore warrior, philosopher, priest turned their backs. This I am, they could not see. If you stand here and point this way, you do not see that. You get attached to the thoughts that you have. You could be standing here on your habits and looking out this way, holding on to the habits that you have. You're not looking at the I am. This I am they could not see, could not suspect, even as it stood at their elbow, regarding them with ordinary human eyes. For it had been settled long ago on abundance evidence that man is creature and depraved. In the history of mankind, there are recorded two great inversions. So now he has talked up to here. Implicitly, he has covered this as well. So think of it, he has covered this much part. So he has covered this side of it. Okay, so this whole, he started by talking about action. He talked about thoughts. He talked about how it can transform the world. Implicitly, he has talked about the discipline of actually carrying it out when he talked about action. So he's talked about this side. Now he's beginning to talk about this other side. In the history of mankind, there are recorded two great inversions. The first set forth by the Nazarene to the effect that love is a greater power and more real than vengeance. Now, the idea of love is that you have a center and the other person has a center, and that's the connection that you have. If you do not acknowledge the center in you, all you have is fear, because everything that is around you that is supporting your life was produced by somebody else. And you're trying to just grab on to that, hold on to that against other people. It's a zero-sum game. Moment you realize that are, you have this tremendous creative power, and so does this other person, you have a completely different relation with the other person. The second proclaimed the earth to be a sphere revolving in its course around the sun. Now, why does he bring this up? He brings it up because this is an inversion. He's talking about the inverted self. Throughout the history, people have regarded, he calls it feudalism. In feudalism, it is the society which is the primary, and individual is just a cog in this giant machine. Who cares about an individual? All the action is here. Saying that individual is the source of all production, all creativity, generating all the values that the society has ever had, is an inversion. It is the Copernican revolution. Throughout history, people have believed that it is this that shapes the individual, not that individuals shape this. These affirmations were made in the face of all evidence sacred to the contrary. Who could feel the earth revolving? Who could fail to see the sun rise and set? What but blood could satisfy, or an eye for an eye? Hence man's powers were not seen as himself, nor himself as his powers. Such recognition would involve a reversal and inversion, both of the sacred lore and common sense. In reactive consequence of age-long self-repression and self-beguilement, the world of mankind is now preparing its way for a third inversion. So far he has talked about the love and implicitly about the love you have for your own core, this part. So he has talked about this area. The world of mankind is now preparing its way for the third inversion. The world of heart and head is becoming dimly sentient that man in his power is a free spirit, a creator. So these thoughts and these emotions bringing together, this is the power to create. So power to create is right here. The long dream of the inverted self is nearing its end. The power to create is connected to the imagination that he started talking about. So it is an awesome power. Cultures are held. We've talked about mythology, for example. The myths shape are the foundations. These imaginations, these symbols that are created are the foundations of societies. And when you realize that man is capable of creating them, instead of just being ruled by society, which is being ruled by previous phantasms, it gives a tremendous power coming from the core of individuals. The long dream of the inverted self is nearing its end, emerging from the heritage of mystical unconsciousness and fantasy. The world of mankind is stirring. Man's deeds are about to become conscious deeds in the open. This point about consciousness is a huge point. what it is saying is that if you look at this periphery, it is not conscious. It is reactive. This center is where the consciousness is. I am, I will see, I will figure out, I will make. All of it is coming from here. When you're operating here, you're simply reacting, responding. Here you're initiating. Man's deeds are about to become conscious deeds in the open. The beauty, the passion, the glory of the past shall merge into a new beauty, new passion, a new glory. As man approaches man, recognizing him, rejoices in him, and with him as born in power. Never in man's time has there been such sound warrant for an attitude of optimism as in our own, the very present day. Yet to him who in myopic fear looks but at the troubled surface, there appears equal warrant in fantasy of pessimism. What a price man shall have paid for freedom from thrall of his powerless imagination, for freedom from the stranglehold of his phantasmal self. He who has lived alive during the past 50 years, he's writing around 1924 or so. Just a second. He who has lived in the past 50 years has viewed an extraordinary drama. He who is starting young shall live through this coming 50 years, will move within the action and scene of shifting of a greater drama. The gravitation. Let me see here. We got people coming in, probably Zoom bombers. We can ignore them. It stands, okay, just a second. The gravitation of the world thought and dream is shifting. Out of the serial collapses of age-long feudalism is arising a new view of man. For man's powers, incertitude, and approach to the infinite, they are bewildering, amazing in diversity. This is all the kind of diversity of the powers. They unfold their intimate complexity to our view as an equally amazing solidarity as we hold steadfast to the realistic concept of man as a free spirit, as creator, even as vast complexity in the outworking of the feudal thought simplifies into a basic concept of self-delusion and self-fear. Okay, I want to see where we are. So folks, how is it going? Are you able to, is this clear? Is this complex? Are you able to follow it? Just go ahead and type exclamation mark. I would like to hear how it is going for people. We'll start with Marisa.
I think the powers as he describes them are mapped very well. The one thing I will say is, so he kind of interweaves the inverted aspects in with the powers, and I don't quite follow where they fit within this diagram, or are they not? Are they not supposed to?
So your question is that where do these powers fit in this diagram?
The inverted ones.
So the inverted ones are simply the forms of these powers that produce. So for example, let's take actions. So actions, you are just holding on to the habits that you have, or you're just holding on to the thoughts that you have. So you have the power to inquire and have curiosity. But instead of having a genuine curiosity, which comes from the center of being conscious, asking the question, what is it? What is it? You are just taking some thoughts that somebody else has produced as given. And though they seem on the surface to answer the questions, those are actually ways of stopping this action from outside, from inside of figuring things out. Similarly, for habits, you are focused on, instead of saying, what should I do? And continuously asking yourself, what would moral action consist of? You are using your power of movement, but you're using it guided by something outside here, which is from the past, from people around us, not being driven from the center. So it's the same actions, but one driven from the center and one driven from the periphery.
So that actually makes sense. So it's a matter of neither of the petals are inherently good or bad, but if one stagnates, then that's where it becomes the inverted. Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
Exactly. So what happens is that this, and thanks to Louis Sullivan, this diagram has gotten better and better. So this, you can see that there is a spiral. So what happens is that when you're doing something, you will break out like this. You will produce all kinds of things. Some of it will be within this, fully integrated. But then there will be lots of products that you will put out, which you will say, okay, these are no longer something that are support my life anymore. And then they're outside. Similarly, you're taking in things from outside, thoughts of other people, expressions of other people, interactions with other people, but you're using selectivity of saying which ones actually are going towards the center, which can be integrated into my life to make my life better. So you're using center as a standard for filtering these things. Evanik had used the phrase filtering. There is filtering that is going on. It is filtering based on the center. Wonderful. All right. So if anybody wants to comment, they're welcome to do that. Otherwise, let's continue. Okay. Our portrayal, let me do this. Okay. Our portrayal is not yet fully clear. Let us go on. There lies another power in man. That power is moral. Its name is choice. Within this one word, choice, lies the story of man's world. So this choice that's right here in the center, that is your I am, that is I will. That is all you really have. So he says, within this one word, choice, lies the story of man's world. So this is really the story of this center unfolding itself in all these other dimensions, producing everything else. It stands for the secret poise within him. I love just the poetry of it. It stands for the secret poise within him. It reveals as a flashlight all his imagings, his fantasies, his willful thoughts, his deeds, from the greatest to the least. Even in this gliding hour called today, this one word, choice, stands for the sole and single power. It is the name of the mystery that lies behind the veil of all human appearances. A word that dissolves the enigma of man's deeds. A word, a light that not only illuminates all his obvious works, all the inner springs and motives of his civilization, but a light whose rays reach within the sanctuary of the secret thought of each and all, thus revealing the man of the past and the man of today, starkly in personal status as a social factor of beneficence or woe. Need we know man's thoughts? View his works, his deeds, they tell his choice. So now what he's saying is that this center expresses itself in all things. It expresses itself in your expressions, in your thoughts, in the tasks that you do, in your actions, in your habits, in your interactions, in your feelings, in your attentions. So it is the choice that is shaping all of these things. Implicit in true freedom of spirit lies a proud, virile will, such glorious power of free will to choose envisages beneficent social responsibility as manifest and welcome. Here now stands in full light, man erect and conscious as a moral power. The will to choose aright lifts him to the peak of social vision, whence he may forecast new and true situations. Let me continue on this free spirit. The free spirit is the spirit of joy. It delights to create in beauty. It is unafraid. It knows no fear. It declares the earth to be its home and the fragrance of earth to be its inspiration. It is strong. It is mighty in beneficence. It views its powers with emotions of adventure. Humility it knows not. It dreams a civilization like unto itself. It would create such a world for mankind. It has the strength. It sees the strength of the fertile earth, the strength of the mountains, the valleys, the far-reaching plains, the vast seas, the rivers, the rivulets, the sky as a wondrous dome, and the sun in its rising, its zenith, its setting, and the night it glorifies, its glories in these powers of the earth and sky as in its own. It affirms itself integral with them. It sees life at work everywhere. Life, the mysterious, the companionable, the ineffable, the evanescent, the gentlest of powers, clothing the earth in a pattern of radiant sublimity, of tenderness, of fairy delicacy, ceaseless at work. Thus, the free spirit feels itself to be likewise clothed as a flowing shoulder garment, a symbol of power akin to the fluent mystery and fecundity of life. Thus it moves in the open with visions clear. Thus is man, the wonder worker, bound up in friendship with the wonder worker life. So this is again a huge point for Sullivan. This parallelism between life and man, that we are taking in life and we are responding to it. We are trying to see the patterns of life, how it flows. You can see it very clearly in Tao Te Ching, saying, be like water. That's what he's saying here. This is a very complex way of saying, be like water. It is deriving inspiration from nature, making it, grasping its patterns, so it's letting life break in on you, taking it to your very core, and then speaking to it in similar voice. That's what he's talking about. Okay, let me see how we're doing on time. It's 10 o'clock. So I'm going to read a couple more paragraphs and then we will take a break. We will go into, give me just a second here. Okay, there is a natural break. So I'm going to put a few more things on the table about how he's thinking about this center and all the powers. And then I'll have you folks discuss it, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Now the real man begins to take shape within our vision. Consider his primary powers. He, the worker, the inquirer, the chooser. Add to this the wealth of his emotions, also powers. Think of how manifold they are, how colorful, how with them he may dramatize his works, his thoughts, his choosings, how he may beautify his works, his thoughts, his choosings, how he may beautify his choice. Think of the power to receive through the channels of senses, to receive through his mystic power of sympathy, which brings understanding to illumine knowledge. This idea of sympathy is very large in his work. This is the same, having sympathy for life, having sympathy for another person, or being able to connect to another living being, to connect with life, to understand it, and to respond to it. Think of the eyesight. Think of what eyesight means as a power. The sense of touch, the power to hear, to listen, and the power of contemplation. Add these to the cumulating interblending of powers. See, this is all what he's talking about. None of these are separate. When you think of them as separate, they begin to die. They are all interblended. Then think again of his enlarging power to act. Deep down within him lies the power we call imagination, the power instantly or slowly to picture forth, the power to act in advance of action, the power that knows no limitations, no boundaries, that renders vivid both giving and receiving, the inscrutable dynamic power that energizes all other powers. Think of man as imagination, then think of him as will. Now enrich the story of his prior mentioned powers with the flow of imagination and steadiness of will. You see how he's building it. First it's action, then he was adding thought to it, then he's adding emotions, now he's adding imagination. So he starts with thought, starts with action, he adds this thought here, then he adds the feelings, then he adds the imagination, and then he adds this moral choice of choosing the moral power, and that brings everything together. Now enrich the story of his prior mentioned powers with the flow of imagination, the steadiness of will. Think anew of his powers to act, of quantity and quality of his powers. As you go around and come back to action, after having gone through thought, the actions are more powerful. After having gone through feelings, the actions are even more powerful. After having gone through imagination, the actions are more powerful. After having been fully conscious of your power to choose, the power to will, your actions are even more powerful. Now think of the freedom such powers bring. Think of the power we call vision, the inner sight, which encompasses larger meaning of outer world, which sees humanity in broad, which beholds the powers without itself, which unifies its inner and its outer world, which sees far beyond where the eye leaves off seeing. And such sympathetic insight finds its goal in the real. Now see man go forth to work, inspired by his vision of the outer world, himself made eager by passion to live and worthily to do so. See him go forth in certitude as a seer, as a prophet, as an evangelist, proclaiming his faith in certitude as worker to build a new home. See him as a poet, a troubadour, as he goes forth singing the new song, the refreshing song, calling in carols. Awake, you dreamers all, lift up your head and be your hearts lifted up that life in splendor may come in. You who dream in the shadows and are sorely perplexed. Thus multitudes vibrate as they dream at the sound of the song in their dream. It is the richness of soul life of multitudes that inspires and at times appalls the observer. For the multitudes are compact of human beings, a vast ceaseless flow of individuals, each a dreamer, each latent in power, the mass moving noiselessly through time, slowly changing in its constancy of renewal. I'm going to read about a page and a half more, and then we will go to the breakout rooms to discuss this, and then we'll come back to talk about all these ideas. Thus though man now appears before us in glamour as a maze of power. So this is maze of power. I like the term maze of powers. We have not yet made his image clear in full and in diversity. While it is plain, when all wrappings are removed, we shall find all men to be alike in native possession of essential powers. We are at once confronted by this paradox. Okay, so when all the wrappings are removed, we see this commonality, because when you wrap yourself in whatever things that you have, that you're used to, then you see the differences. But when you give up these wrappings, throw away the wrappings, you're basically the same. But here is the paradox, that all men are obviously different, that no two are alike. In plain words, we find each human being unique. When we say unique, we mean the only one. The each one is the only one. If we have mused long upon the immense fecundity and industry of life, the paradox vanishes. The only one and the all coalesce. The individual and mass become one. And in this new phase of power, whose stupendous potency of creative art in civilization stuns the sense of possibilities, now opens to our view the democratic vista. Now see unfold the power of the only one in multiple, and the one becomes vast complex of unique powers inspired of its free spirit and its power of beneficence. Its works now solidly founded on the full emergence of courage and evanishment of fear. See, what he's saying is that moment you give up this focus on the periphery by turning your back on the center, you're all completely different. But moment you pay attention to the center and see this tremendous nature of human beings, you see that we are the same in some way, but the specific patterns are going to be different. So that's what I like about this diagram, that it is universal. It captures everything. At the same time, it is customizable. You can draw where you are on this, where you are stronger. So the individual spirals are going to be different. But that there is a spiral is going to be the same. That all powers are going to be involved is going to be the same. To the extent to which they play in are going to be different. And that is the point about that. So next up, okay, I just have half a page left. Let me see here. The feudal concept of self-preservation is poisoned at the core by the virulent assumption of the master and man, of potentate and slave, of external and internal suppression of life. Urge the only one of its faith in human sacrifice as a means of salvation. Okay, now this is the key part. The only one is ego. I am the unique. This I am is just yours. Only, this is unique to you. You have to say I yourself. The only one is ego, the I am, the unique, the most precious of man's powers, their source and summation in diversity. So this is the source of all powers. This is what is unique, and it's the source of all these powers. Without ego, which is life, man vanishes. Without this, there is no this. There is no circle here. There is no living circle without the center. Ego signifies identity. This is a huge point. This is the identity. If you're doing this, if you identify yourself, really don't have identity. Only with I, you have the identity. I shaping everything about your life and making these choices. And it is full of effort. It is full of effort. This is just drifting. Outside is just drifting. It is not a tenant. It is all in all. It is the free spirit. It is present everywhere throughout man's wondrous being. It is what we call the spiritual. Okay, so this is what spirit is. A term now becoming interchangeable with the physical. You see how he does this is function, which is shaping the form. So it becomes it's like life of a living being. It's together. It is the sign and symbol of man's immense integrity. Integrity, another key way of thinking about this. The I am that I am. To eat the earth, the world of humanity, the multitudes, the universe, become egocosm. Thus, to the eye of the earnest watcher, the dual man of the legend and the present mythical belief fades as incorporeal ghosts. Departing it leads the ghostly feudal scapegoat with his burden of sin. It is man's manifest integrity that reveals him valid, sound to the core. It is this spiritual integrity that defines him human, that points true to his high moral power, the power of valid choice. This new vision of man is the true vision of man. Towards this new truth, this inversion, the world of mankind is slowly turning. Vaguely conscious, strives to articulate that which is yet too deep, too remote, too new for its words. But it is not too deep, too remote, or too new for its aspirations. So this is all about aspiration to this. It's all about simply living. That's what it is about.